I'm Eric Johnson, a divorce and family law attorney here in Utah, and today I'm meeting with Gary Klein, licensed clinical social worker. Why don't you tell me a little bit about why we're meeting today? What's the subject we're going to cover?
The subject we're going to cover is a certain personality type that so many people come into my office for therapy and they start describing a personality, and I actually got sick of drawing this thing out, so I had it made up, and I'll show you in just a moment. And sometimes I'll say, can I fast track this? And I'll just go through. And what's interesting, folks who have this personality, it's like they all go to the same acting school and they get the same script. So once I start to see some red flags, I say, let me just fill this in for you. Does that sound accurate? And they say, yes, how did you know? And then I say, okay, bad news is this is considered a pretty serious personality disorder and you need to watch yourself. This is really important for people who are thinking of getting divorced or who are getting divorced. If the other person has this personality structure, they're going to need some help to dance through the landmine field.
There are a lot of you who think that when you're getting a divorce, well, my spouse is crazy. Sometimes that's correct, sometimes it's not. The more experience I get in this field, the more I begin to think there probably is a greater incidence of mental illness or some kind of pathology going on in a divorce situation. I used to just think there's a lot of people that just don't get along anymore, but I wasn't willing to say what the cause is. Mm-hmm. So I'm here and Gary's here. We're not here to tell you that this happens in every single divorce. But if you're saying this seems beyond just a matter of not getting along, and I just don't feel, I'm blamed for a lot of things, but I can't see how I'm really being blamed or why I would be at fault, that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. Your gut will tell you, as long as you're not nuts. But hey, the problem, I'm not a perfect person, but the problem does not lie with me. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to try to give you some idea as to what might be the problem at your spouse's end.
Okay. And
is that correct?
Absolutely. That's interesting that you said your gut, because inside the lining of our stomach, there are actually more neurons there than in our spine. So our stomach oftentimes is called the second brain. So the enteric nervous system, something goes, and we get this feeling like, this doesn't feel right. And then what happens is, usually we override it with our prefrontal lobes and go, well, maybe I'm being too sensitive, or maybe I'm whatever. Usually when we listen to our gut, it's oftentimes more accurate than what the executive function is telling us.
That's interesting. I think that a lot of that might be cultural. It's because we're told when you get those butterflies in your stomach, just overcome them. Mm-hmm. Or when you get these feelings like, don't let your suspicions override your mighty brain. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that gut feelings are pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Don't discount them.
Don't discount them. Another great one that I learned when dealing with folks who have the personality that we're going to talk about, a therapist friend of mine, I explained a situation. I said, oh, I just didn't feel good. And she said, did you get slimed? I said, slimed? And she said, you know, in Ghostbusters? And I go, yeah, that's how I feel. So that's a real good indicator when people feel like they got slimed, and especially repeatedly, they might be dealing with someone with this kind of personality. Okay, so in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, they have 10 personality disorders listed. There's 3 in cluster A, there's 3 in cluster C, and then there's 4 in cluster B. You never hear about cluster A or cluster C, or rarely you hear about cluster B all the time. Borderline, antisocial, histrionic, and narcissistic. What we're going to be talking about is a lot more of the, they're called cluster B because it's like a ball of yarn where each thread kind of touches the other thread. So you don't have just one or just the other. You might have more narcissist with borderline, or more borderline with narcissist. All right, so they all kind of go together. This is what happens. You are here, down here at the bottom, and this is an upside down pyramid, and it is about to crush you if you allow it. What happens is the other person...
I'll hold up mine as you do that.
Okay. The first thing they do is they will engage you. They have to engage you. And that's why I have the fish hook up there with the 3 prongs. These folks have maybe 30 or 300. Anything to get you sucked in. It could be money, sex, a rude comment, anything at all, so that you start talking to me. And if that doesn't work, then if I've got this personality type, I might go say, hey, did you hear what Eric said about, boom, and so that I can hopefully hook you in that way. All right. Then, after they engage you, they create chaos. So I have a friend who's a martial artist, and he showed me this thing where he'd grab my hair and he'd say, tell me when you feel off balance. And I was lean back just a little bit, and I'd say right there, and he'd say, okay, at that point I own you. If I can control your head, and I wasn't leaning back very far, he said, to your mind. And the same thing forward. So this personality type, they engage you and then they create chaos. They will lie, white lie, gaslighting, doing things to make the other person feel like they're crazy. I never said that. You're the one who said that.
Yeah, if you're wondering what gaslighting is, it comes from a movie called Gaslight, where a husband is basically leaving things lying around, moving them around, stuff like that, and the wife is saying, hey, what's going on? And he's telling her, well, that never happened. Right. I don't know what you're talking about, and so that's come to mean gaslighting, where you really try to make somebody question everything they know and everything they think.
That's right.
So that's gaslighting.
That's exactly what it is. A wonderful book called Stop Walking on Eggshells that talks about borderline personality
I'd
disorder.
recommend you buy it. I've tried to check it out of the library, and it's always on hold. So unless you are a very fast reader, just buy yourself a copy. You'll save yourself a lot of hassle.
Yes. You can also get it on audio, which is great. I have it on my iPod for a refresher. Recommend it to my clients all the time.
Okay.
And that's what that walking on eggshells is. We're off balance. Now,
I like the way you described that, because that's true. The chaos, the uncertainty, it just doesn't add up.
it doesn't add up.
And so you just go into this, you're so sensitive and tentative.
Right. Absolutely, you're just off balance, and then you're controlled. It's like they have your hair and they can just yank you around. Had a couple in my office one day, and it was the man who had this personality type. And dealing with these folks, it's like picking up liquid mercury. You go to grab it and it just squirts in different directions. And so you go over there and it squirts, you can't do it. And so the husband kept saying things to the wife, and she would go to address that, and then he would jump and talk about another topic and then accuse her over here. And finally, she just looked at him and she said, this doesn't even make any sense. And I couldn't say this at this point, but I thought, oh, sweetheart, it makes perfect sense. The point is, there is no point. And that's the chaos. So she's running around, and finally, she just got so exhausted and said, fine, just do whatever you want, I don't care. Okay, so going around here, after they create the chaos, it's always about domination. So this wheel goes around and it's always about domination. They will use anger, they will use fear, threats, anything at all to get on top, and they are the perpetrator. Let's say you go to stand up to them and say, no, you can't talk to me that way, or that's not the way it happened. Oftentimes they will try to get back on top with some kind of threat or anger, because to them, if you're down here and they're up here, that's equal. And when you're trying to have an adult-to-adult relationship with them, that's a threat to them. They've got to get you back down. If that doesn't work, then they go right down into the victim role. And they go, oh, I was just trying to help, and you know what, I'm not appreciative. Does this sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
They go to the same school and get the same script. It's the same thing over and over and over. Now, one of the crazy things is whether they are the perpetrator, which is first place to them, or they're the victim, that's still first place to them, because it's about domination.
Yeah, the best at being bad, if not the best.
Right. And what happens is, folks who don't have this type of personality, when we see someone who's crying, or, oh, I was just trying to help you, and our ego defenses come down, and we go, oh, maybe I was being too harsh, I shouldn't have said that, okay, well, boom, and then they're right back on top again. And we're like, that doesn't make any sense. And the point is, there is no point. Okay, now this part, intermittent reinforcement, this is a tricky one. If I work in a factory and I make a widget and I get $1, and I make a widget and I get $1, I'm going to get bored very soon. The strongest kind of reinforcement is intermittent. You never know when you're going to get your payoff. That's why gambling can be so addicting. if I'm willing to sit here for 2 hours and I'm down to my last dollar and I pull the one armband and all of a sudden I get this payoff, I might be willing to sit there now for 10 hours. And then as I get these payoffs, but I never know when they're coming, maybe I'll be willing to sit there for 3 days and mortgage my house.
Just that, for lack of a better term, that sense of mystery is what keeps us
Yes.
engaged,
Yes.
interested.
Yeah.
And so these perpetrators of, or I shouldn't say perpetrators, but people that suffer from these personality disorders, they like the intermittent. Is that what it is?
Okay.
They like, or they like to do it to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And what they'll do is every once in a while, all of a sudden, that was the person I married originally. And I go, oh, that's what I always wanted. Maybe we can start over again. Maybe, here are the flowers, here are the gifts, all this kindness. And then we go, oh, this is just so wonderful. Our ego defenses come back down. Boom. And they're right back on top again.
And are they conscious of this? Or are they doing this subconsciously? Are they waiting for your defenses to go down, or do they just notice when they're going down? And are they plotting?
Good question. Personally, I don't think these are personality disorders. That's heresy in behavioral health. I think these are defense mechanisms for a brain that's wired more like a reptile's. And so that's what I call them, the mammals and the reptiles. I think the reptiles know exactly what they're doing most of the time, and they just don't care. All right, so for example, textbook narcissism. Boundaries, you set a boundary and they just step over it. You set another one and they just step over it. It's what's mine is mine, what's yours is mine. Tough, that's just the way it is. So if I step on an ant, I'm not a murderer. All right? So if they steamroll over someone, since you don't count, well, tough, get out of the way next time. So I believe they know exactly what they're doing, they just don't care.
They just don't care.
They just don't care. So if you think of sociopathy, someone who's a sociopath and their brain is like a block of Swiss cheese, and where the holes are, there's no place for the conscience to kick in and go, I shouldn't do that. So they can just steamroll over someone, and then you say, hey, that didn't feel very good, and then, well, get out of the way then, it's your own fault.
Are they aware that they're different? Do they know do they know there are holes?
No, that's one of the interesting things. When these folks come in, first off, you see this all the time. The man or the woman comes in, hi, why are you here? Well, my husband, my wife said, I have to get myself fixed, or he or she's not going to come in until I get myself fixed. Okay, that's the first red flag. It's kind of like if someone is holding my head underwater, all I care about is getting air and that's it. This personality type has to be right. Regardless, they have to be right.
And it's borderline narcissistic, histrionic,
and then antisocial. Antisocial is criminal thinking and criminal behavior, and the histrionic is the center of attention, but it's just over the top. And then the narcissistic, it's mine is mine, what's yours is mine. I'm always right, you're always wrong, shut up. And then borderline is, if you think of bipolar, because you hear that a lot, oh, this person's bipolar, it's like, no, it's almost always borderline.
And borderline's maybe the closest to a mental illness of those. Would that be right?
Yeah, well, it just depends on how far.
That's what I'm saying. But if somebody's trending more borderline, that's the closest to somebody, because they called it borderline schizophrenia, right? That's where it comes from, or schizoid something or other.
It's borderline.
It's a misnomer today, but that's where it originally came from.
Yes, it originally came from someone would start acting as if they were schizophrenic, so there they go, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, they're just completely normal again. So it was on the border between everyday neurosis and psychosis. Psychosis is a loss of touch with reality. And so you would see that, they also called it ambulatory schizophrenia. There they go, there they come, and moving around. So if someone's in a relationship with these guys, you have to watch yourself, because they're reptiles, and they're supposed to guard the sheep or whatever, and the conscience isn't developed. And it's not going to be either.
So, why does an attorney need to be aware of this? I mean, you've told me before we met, that's the story about some experiences that you've that you're aware of. And I think those would be a good illustration, because I guarantee there's someone listening or watching who's going to say, the light will come on.
Right, yes.
So why don't we move on, unless there's anything else we wanted to cover about that. Do we need to do anything else leading up to this? Anything else on the chart that we need to cover before we do that?
No, hopefully when folks look at this, first off, if they're in a relationship with someone who has this personality type, I guarantee you they'll say, that makes sense. That's exactly what's going on.
Do you ever find people that are like hoping their spouse has this problem? So they can kind of feel better about their own misdeeds, or just be that much more certain. You know what I'm saying? You know what? At least I'm not nuts. At least I'm not suffering. I'm not some kind of sociopath or something.
Okay. Yes. What happens invariably is when people are involved in this kind of a relationship for a period of time, they get hammered. Emotionally, psychologically, maybe physically, they really get their cages rattled. This happens every time when someone comes in who's in a relationship with this. The person will say, well, maybe I'm the crazy one. And see, there's that self-doubt. I'm off balance now. The folks who have this kind of personality, they're spectacular at projecting all of their unresolved crap onto their spouse. And after the spouse hears it over and over and over, and these people are spectacular actors and actresses, after a while we start to go, well, maybe there is some truth in that. Maybe I did provoke him or her, or...
It's actually kind of, what's sad is that's a good personality trait being used against you.
Right, yes.
It's some humility. It's like, well, maybe, I don't want to just think I'm perfect all the time,
right.
so maybe I've missed something.
Right. That's spectacularly accurate.
Yeah.
And when we try to take the high road against these folks, we ended up getting our rear ends kicked because they don't play by the rules and won't play by the rules. The rules are whatever they say they are right then to serve their needs and to keep us off balance. So to answer your question, almost everybody who comes in, who's in a relationship with someone like this, they feel a tremendous sense of relief and they say, oh, I thought I was the crazy one, just like the gaslighting scene. Oh, it's not me. Also, it takes a long time to get that reassurance because they keep going back to, well, maybe I did misplace this money, or maybe and it's reinforcement over and over again. You're not the crazy one, trust me. Someone with this personality would never say, I wonder maybe if I have this characteristic or this is me. Because with a high degree of narcissism, they have to be right all the time about everything. And they would never admit to that. Now, in a rare case, someone with this personality type might say, well, maybe that is me, but it's
only because they're smart enough, to...
Yes, and then they're right back on top of it.
So in a sense, one of the bad things about all the progress we're making in this area is that the people in cluster B are going to read this stuff, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, the BBC version of that, where he's very aware that he's a cluster B guy, so he studies it and knows how to act like somebody who's not, when the circumstances need.
Absolutely. That's why folks with the cluster B, therapy is really a bad idea for them. Okay, they don't have the brain capacity. Not that they're stupid. Their moral conscience just doesn't work like someone else's. All right. And I just totally forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
No.
We were speaking about rarely will people say, I have a problem,
yes,
unless they're so devious that they...
Okay. Therapy actually is counterproductive. So I worked with inmates for years, and the same thing. What happens is, either with the inmates or when couples come in, the person with the cluster B traits, the first job is to expose the spouse for being a rotten, horrible person in front of a therapist. All right, that's what they do.
Yeah.
They've got a podium now. The next thing is to discredit the therapist, to make the therapist look like an idiot, which means that person's right. Say,
And they can have their cake and eat it too.
Absolutely.
They can use the therapist to establish that it's the other spouse, and then you're a quack.
Right.
You're a hack. You don't know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. How can both of those things exist? It's like, it doesn't matter. I'm on top.
The point is, there is no point. Exactly. That's exactly it. You got it. And then the third thing is that the person will learn dynamics and terminology, and then when they go home, that gets used against the spouse.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
It's evil, but
Right. Yeah, it's like the tar baby story,
Yeah.
with kids. And boom, you hit the tar and you get stuck, and you keep hitting and kicking, and it's like quicksand. You just keep going down deeper and deeper. What I tell folks and myself is we're no match for these people if we think we're going to go toe to toe with them. They do this 24/7 and have done so for years or decades. And you and I have a little bit of experience trying to talk rationally to someone who's not rational.
and even if you had a lot of experience, the only thing that's going to teach you is how to get away, but not how to win. And that winning just is disengaging.
Yes, absolutely. And once again down here, it says you are here. The first thing you have to do is to get out from underneath this upside down pyramid and not engage. And what happens is you end up taking a lot of hits because as they talk trash to you or about you, or try to drag the kids into it, as soon as you step in and say, well, let me tell you what he did or what she did, you're playing their game. Because you've engaged, boom, and then there you go on the hamster wheel again.
Yeah. So in a situation, let's talk about a situation where you've got somebody in cluster B, and you have children with, and since we're both men, we'll talk about her.
Mm-hmm.
We can flip that on its head if you were a couple of women or something like that. Okay, so I'm married to a crazy one. I'm not using that term. I'm married to somebody who's driving me nuts and doing all these things. And I finally come to understand it. Well, now I've been accused of being an abusive spouse, an abusive father, porn addiction. I'm a drunk, even though I may just have a social drink from time to time and have never been drunk in my life, or whatever it is. What do I do now? I mean, the neighbors start to talk, and they listen, and again, that cluster B personality is tapping into their fears and their desire to do something and to be compassionate and generous. What does this, in fact, maybe this would be a good time about the darkness. Is this a good time to talk about that?
Sure.
It is, and I'd like to hear that, because I found it a compelling story.
What happened?
Start it out however you want.
Okay. So it was a friend of mine who pointed out, he's not a therapist, he said, there's this nice guy syndrome. He said, if you look at all of us, and he named 5 or 6 of us, he said, we all ended up with this type of personality. Another red flag, don't go rescue a man or a woman. All right, oh, that person, I'm going to go help him. That's oftentimes how they get someone engaged.
I am not a mental health professional, and I can tell you that it's people that rescue others that keep me in business.
Yeah. Don't do it, bad idea. So I didn't come up with any of these names except one, but they're really accurate. It sounds unkind, but it's really accurate. And since they're guy friends, again, these are women, but I could talk about the other way around. One of them is Medusa, the darkness. These are really accurate names, and the one I came up with was the Antichrist. She's the worst cluster B I've ever seen. I'm sorry, what was your question?
So we've talked about those different types. We've got a divorce situation now, and we're dealing with someone in a cluster B spouse.
Okay.
They're talking to neighbors. They're talking to my own family.
Right.
They're calling my boss. All of these things that people watching and listening know. It's like, yeah, that's me. Okay, we know that. You and I both know that from different ends of the spectrum. But we know this is happening. And now the court's listening.
Right.
And we talked about this actually before you got here today, where it's often very useful for that cluster B spouse. But here's the thing: that cluster B spouse can lie about things that could be true. And then another person who's not suffering in a cluster B situation can say, "Yeah, my spouse really is abusive," and in fact, he is. My spouse really is abusing alcohol, and he really is. But well, in this scenario, this guy is not perfect, but he's not doing any of these things he's accused of.
Right.
But we've got this cluster B spouse who says it doesn't matter. My point is to just dominate. So I'm going to make things up. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to make things miserable. I even want a divorce. So this is one of the ways I'm going to go about laying my foundations. Just destroying this person. I'm going to talk about being miserly so I get more money. I'm going to talk about being a terrible spouse so I can, or father, and so I can get the kids, and terrible spouse so I can get an alimony, and a spendthrift so I can, and so all the debt will be his, or because I've run up the debt, that's because he was, whatever it is.
There you go.
And all those sort of things. Now the court believes it. The court, this is what I was coming back to. The court goes, well, boy, if these things are true, I have an opportunity to fix them. I could put some safeguards in place.
Right.
And if they're not true, well, gee, the safeguards aren't that bad, right? Better safe than sorry. Abundance of caution. And so that guy now gets treated as that kind of thing.
Right.
And even though he could go around saying, well, that was just out of an abundance of caution, the court really said, it's like, yeah, right. Well, then why does this order exist? Why are you told you have to account for every penny? Why is it you have to be supervised when you see your children? Why is it that you've been submitted to a mental health evaluation or all that sort of thing?
Yeah.
So how do you win? How do you show a court? It's like, look, by being so cautious, you're trampling all over my rights. You're treating me like a bad person, and where there's smoke, people are going to think there's fire.
Right.
Take it away, Gary.
And they are Academy award-winning actors and actresses. How could you not believe someone who's sitting there sobbing? And it's like, oh my gosh, that poor thing.
Oh, and detailed stories.
Yeah.
That's something the courts always fall for. Oh, listen, that level of detail, there's no way you could make that.
Right. And that's what they don't understand, because they're thinking like mammals and expecting other people to feel and think like mammals too, and it's a different game.
We're dealing with a lizard.
Absolutely, or a crocodile, an angry crocodile. The person with this personality will use the kids either as a battering ram or metaphorically grabbing them by the ankles and swinging them around to punish the spouse. The kids are possessions, they are things, their function is to make me look good, and that's pretty much it.
Here's another situation I get in. So then, especially when there's kids involved, oftentimes the courts, it's kind of in vogue right now, is they will chew out both people to maintain some air of impartiality. Okay, that's a problem, first of all, because again, the dominant party is winning. Hey, go ahead and chew me out. I'm completely evil. The other person's totally innocent, but now we've been put at the same level. In a sense, that's being on top because that person should be on the bottom and now has been lifted up. The other thing is then they're saying, you know what, you're going to have these children, you've got to get along with each other for the sake of your kids. What do you have to say about that?
That's really good advice, and when you're dealing with two mammals, it can work. When you've got a reptile and a mammal, it ain't going to happen.
Well, doesn't, and I'm going to play devil's advocate. Well, maybe the person who's not suffering from these problems needs to just apply himself a little more.
Yeah.
Maybe make some sacrifices. Do it for the sake of the kids, Gary. What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that is the person who doesn't have this personality type gets a paper trail against him or her. The sanctions that the court levies on, now the person looks guilty, and over time, part of this big upside down pyramid is the perception that this is the bad person.
And how could you not make that conclusion?
Right.
Sanction after sanction, allegation after allegation. Right. And the saying, what was it? A lie's travel halfway around the world before truth even gets its pants on in the morning.
Right.
So what? Like, hey, your spouse is complaining again, or maybe now we're in an ex-spouse situation. More complaints. You're not showing up on time. You're not bringing the kids back. You haven't paid a full amount of child support. Alimony is past due. You're stalking me.
Right.
What? And of course, I've I've called it the prejudice of the accusation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make an impassioned denial?
Right.
I can come in and cry and talk about how frightened I am and how scared I am and how victimized I've been,
Mm-hmm.
but once the person, so if I'm accusing you and you can see the tears and everything, and then it's like, what do you have to say for yourself? Like, he's lying. All that does is make you look cold.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and so what happens is, again, the courts are like, I feel like I should do something. I don't want to just say, go. You haven't proven anything. You've told a great story, but there's nothing to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a shame on the courts. They know better. They know that they should say, look, you're telling a very persuasive story, but I've got to have something,
Right.
some objective kind of evidence. And coming in here over and over again often becomes that evidence. Like, well, she wouldn't be back, or he wouldn't be back, over and over and over again, if it weren't true.
Right. So what happened with the darkness is she did that same thing. She kept going back and back and back. She took my friend back to court one time, even though he was paying her thousands of dollars per month in alimony and child support, because she wanted to be reimbursed for vitamins. Right. The $3,000 a month somehow didn't seem to cover that, and she kept winning because she would go back over and over and over. Something that's really important, anytime we justify ourselves, we're one down, we look guilty, and we are weak. So what you'll see with this personality type is we'll tell me about, and then as soon as we go, well, the reason I did that's because, boom, we're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So with these folks, try to never justify. What I tell clients is start to document everything you can. Save all of the texts, send those to your email. Have a separate folder on your computer or on an external hard drive. If it's legal in Utah, record the phone conversations.
It is legal in Utah.
Then absolutely.
You don't have to tell them you're doing it. If they ask if you're doing it, you don't have to tell them you are. In fact, you can lie and say, no, I'm not. In fact, I tell people, this is a useful tidbit we did in the script, is that it's like, why? If I were recording you, would you tell me something different? Mm-hmm. And that really puts them in a box, because then they realize, oh yeah, now I'm the one who looks like...
Right, because
if I were being recorded, I would be having a different conversation.
Right, because now they have to justify themselves, and then you can see that.
Exactly, that's a good example.
Yeah. So, yeah, with the kids, something else that you hear a lot is, oh, well, he or she must be telling the truth, because who would do that to their children? And a mammal wouldn't do that, but a reptile would, because they're ants, and their job is to make me look good, and that's it.
Right, the ants exist to sustain me, or to entertain me,
right,
or to get me whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have I haven't asked you this, so I mean, if you're not prepared, do you have an opinion as to why do courts buy it? I have my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
If you agree with me, fine. If you disagree with me, fine, because I'm still trying to find out, how is this so effective? Now, granted, we never know, we rarely know that nothing but lies have been told by the opposing party, right? Mm-hmm. When you're talking to a couple, rarely will you know that person is totally full of it.
Right.
You may have strong suspicions. If you are a betting man, you may feel very comfortable about saying, I'm pretty sure this person's full of it. Mm-hmm. What can a court do? So, because I think they're afraid they're going to look callous, and it's like,
right.
The crying, blubbering person mm-hmm. was just told, there's no evidence to support this.
Right.
So you lose. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as they walk out and everything like that, I mean, that would rattle me.
Right.
What do we tell a poor commissioner or a judge who's saying, I'm learning a little bit more about this cluster B stuff. Mm-hmm. It only makes sense. How is it that all the people I know, maybe one or two of them have this problem, but yet when I come into my job, right. virtually every person is complaining about this list of horribles. Mm-hmm. I'm beginning to see what's going on here is there's a high degree of cluster B people coming in front of me. That would explain it.
Yes.
Because why is it that in my own circles, there are more or less happy marriages, mm-hmm. but then these same socioeconomic groups that come mm-hmm. in front of me in court, it's porn and drugs and child abuse
Right.
and spouse abuse and abandonment
Right.
over and over and over. They've been married 17 years, nobody's seen anything, but as soon as the accusations start,
Right.
they're shunned by their church and their community and the school and everything else out of a desire to do what's right, but they're being duped.
Right.
How can we help judges at least entertain that idea?
You have to get in front of them and explain cluster B, and have to get video of actual cluster Bs, let them read the text, the emails, and all of that. One of the things is in a relationship with someone like this, because we think we're talking to a mammal, and it's like, you know, when we were kids, we found out there really isn't any Santa Claus, and we're just mortified, and it took us a long time to figure it out. It's kind of like that, where it's like, really? You really don't care about the kids? And then they'll cry, I love my children, and they'll turn around and use the kids
Yeah, I
against
agree. What you're saying is like it really bursts a bubble. It shakes our faith
Right.
in humanity.
Right. And it's hard to accept that, oh, I've been married to an alligator for 17 years.
Better to believe that the stories are true. The tears mean something.
Right.
The expressed concern for children is genuine.
Right.
Because it's better to believe that than to think that people would use tears
Right.
and children and other wholesome stuff
Yes.
just so they can crush ants.
Just so they can crush hands.
So, and then I forgot what I was going to ask, but what can courts do then? Should they, is there a book they should read? Should they take a course? Should they have some continuing education? Because you see it all the time.
All the time.
And rarely do you get to talk to a court about it.
Right.
Because it's there's confidentiality and all the things like that. I see it. I don't know all the terminology. And so a lot of what I've seen and heard, you're helping me to see through a new lens. But the fact is, and I will say it's a fact, these people are coming in and they're manipulating and duping the legal system and destroying good people and destroying the relationships between good parents and children.
Right.
And the courts are complicit, but go home feeling like they're heroes.
Right.
Which makes it even more perverse.
Yes.
I mean, what can be done?
It is. Perverse is a really good word. And there's a phrase, and it's called duping delight. When someone with a high degree of sociopathy, they get the other person to buy the lie, that energizes them.
Here's the question I was going to ask. You know, back a few years ago, it used to be one of the marks of a child molester is that he denies being a child molester, which was just a new version of the whole witch hunt.
Right. Yeah.
You'll know a witch because she'll deny being a witch. So I can see how this could be turned on its head and somebody could say, oh, you know what? My sincere spouse is really cluster B, and all these things are lies. What's the poor court supposed to do? Because, I mean, remember, first of all, we want to trust our feelings.
Right.
Tears mean sincerity. Complaints about, or expressions of concern about children mean truth. Oh wait, but now I'm being told that's just the opposite in certain circumstances. What can the poor judge do? If you don't know the answers, that's
No, I don't know, other than document everything. There was a young man, he came in to have an assessment done. His wife had made all of these accusations. I had to do a big, lengthy assessment, and he said, he sent me some audio files of his wife, because I was listening to him, and I said, yeah, okay, I've heard this before, he may be telling the truth, I don't know, and I heard the audio and went, oh, she's cluster B. Textbook cluster B, and I put that in my report, that I would suggest the court go through and listen to this, because clearly this fits the pattern, clearly. And he ended up being okay.
I actually had, you inspired me. I think there may be the kernel of something here. It's just as they say, it's better that 100 guilty men go free than an innocent man go to jail.
Right.
I think it's probably something similar here. It is better to let 100 bad spouses and parents get away with it than to buy into ruining a good person through false allegations that we just react to out of an abundance of caution.
Right.
I think so too. I mean, because eventually, it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, that would weaken the cluster B people. If they knew going into court, I better have something more than just my tears and my detailed stories. I've actually got to prove it. Because then, being cluster B, they go, I don't have any proof, screw it. I'll figure out some other way to make people miserable. Is there any truth to that, or am I off base?
What happens is, if we had a whiteboard, I would draw a line this way, and this is what we're calling a personality disorder: mild, moderate, and severe. This way, we have low functioning, moderate functioning, and high
So
functioning.
for those listening to just the audio, you've drawn an XY axis.
Yes.
And along the X axis we have, what was it, high, moderate, what was it?
Along this one,
Yeah, along the X axis.
mild,
The horizontal axis, mild.
moderate, and severe. And then this is functioning.
The
So
Y
down
axis working up from the bottom.
is low functioning, moderate functioning, and then high functioning. So what you see is people who are high functioning and have severe personality issues. Those are the dictators of the world. If you dial back the severity down, a lot of those people are the CEOs, all right?
And politicians.
And politicians, yeah.
And lawyers.
And lawyers, absolutely, and therapists too.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely, that's really frightening, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, anytime these folks, the reptiles, are drawn to power, just like a moth to a flame. And so the more powerful the position, the more cluster Bs you're going to see. The lower functioning, severe cluster Bs end up in prison or death row. And so that XY axis is really helpful in, instead of saying, oh, this person can't be like that, it's all or nothing, black or white, it's not. It's this chart
That's good to
can
know.
flow. Yeah, it's really good to know.
Well, are cluster Bs lazy? Do they like a path of least resistance? Or will they go to great lengths to set you up? For example, in Gaslight, the movie, in Gaslighting, it's pretty easy for me to mess with you. You know, I'll move stuff around. It didn't take a whole lot, but the small effort that I make has outsized benefits and effects. So I'm asking, like, if I were to come into court, it's like, Your Honor, these are a lot of terrible allegations made against this man. Where's the proof? You'd think that if this had happened so often and to such degrees, there'd be something, some trace.
Right.
Will the cluster B person go, won't make that mistake? Or will they just kind of move on to easier, the weaker parts of the herd?
It depends on how severe and how high or low functioning they are. So I was telling you about the Antichrist. She's the worst cluster B I've ever seen. A guy I went to high school with, I've known for decades. After they were divorced, years after, she accused him of sexually molesting their children. Had him arrested. Got out the next day on bail. She coerced another one of her kids, the youngest one. Daddy did this to you, didn't he? Okay, I guess. Had him arrested again. Currently, he's doing 2 1 to 15 sentences, prison sentences. He's been in prison for 5 years. There was no evidence, 0 evidence. The nurse for the prosecution testified and said, this is the witch trial thing, there was no scarring, there was no bruising, there was nothing, because something else had happened years ago, and the boys had been examined, right? So that nurse said, no, there was absolutely no evidence, but that means that there probably was something that happened because the scars and the bruises healed up. So that's the witch trial again.
Yeah, that's...
They're dangerous, they're really dangerous.
And besides, what feels better? Letting a possible child molester go, or putting someone in jail? It's not me.
Right.
I'm not the one in jail.
Right.
Nobody. And when I go home, people say, "Hey, did that child molester get convicted?" You bet he did. No one can blame me for letting somebody out loose on the streets.
Right.
And that's what kind of gets me. It's kind of like, when they came for the communists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. When they came for the Catholics, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Catholic. And when they came for the Union, but then finally when they came for me, there was no one to stand up for me.
Right.
That's what matters. And so this abundance of caution thing, I just have a hard time believing anybody would lie about this. It's like, Your Honor, you used to be an attorney. What do you mean? You saw it all the time.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's interesting. This has been so helpful. I know it has, because there's people I know there's people that are hearing or watching that are going to say, and all this time,
Right.
I thought it was me, or I know it's not me, but I'm getting my butt kicked.
Right.
And now I might be able to find some way, some name to put on this and get the court to look at it.
Right.
I appreciate it.
And document everything. If I were in a relationship with someone like this, on my cell phone or my tape recorder, I would have it going all the time.
That's funny because you don't know this about me because we haven't talked, but I encourage people. I say it's one of the best ways to save thousands of dollars and potentially keep you out of jail or from having your rights cut off to your kids,
Right.
because you can catch people doing that.
Right.
You keep your journals, you keep your calendars,
Yes.
you video record your exchanges and all that sort of thing, so that when you drive away happily with the kids, the cops don't pull you over 2 miles down the road
Right.
saying, we were just told you grabbed these kids and abducted them.
Right. Absolutely. I would get, if I were divorcing someone with this personality, and even if there weren't kids, but especially if there were kids, I would get nanny cams and car cams and everything else. I think that's the best line of defense.
Yeah. Now make sure that you're doing it legally.
Right.
Videotaping is a little different. Audio recording, as long as one party to the conversation, which can be you, the recorder, knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal. You cannot surreptitiously video record people with sound and video at the same time. So before you do it, Gary's giving good advice. Just make sure that you understand you're not violating any laws in the process of protecting yourself.
Right, because the cluster B will use that
We'll
against
figure out
you.
a way to manipulate and exploit that too.
Absolutely.
Gary, for the sake of people that may want to hear more or talk to you, let us know your practice, your address, telephone number, and if you have a website, an email that you want to share so they can contact you.
Sure. 1399 South, 700 East, Suite 11B, and my phone number is 801-864-7640, and my email is Klein, which is KLEIN999 @gmail.com.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.